Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's National Hockey League video conference. I'm John Delapina from the NHL's Communications Department, and all of us at the league send along our best for good health to you and your families. Today, we have a treat. We bring together four members of the new wave of general managers in our league. They're charged not only with winning Stanley Cups for their respective organizations, but they also serve a big picture role as stewards of the game. So please join me in welcoming Julien BrisBois of the Tampa Bay Lightning, John Chayka of the Arizona Coyotes, Kyle Dubas of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Bill Guerin of the Minnesota Wild. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for having us.
Hey. As we always do when we start these calls, we just go around the group and we just see how you're doing, who you're with, where you are. So let's go in alphabetical order. Julien, why don't you start us off? How you doing and where are you?
I can't complain personally. My family's here. I'm in Tampa. Everyone is healthy. My extended family in Montreal is healthy. My in-laws are healthy. We've been pretty fortunate here in the Tampa area. Number of cases are very low. As a metropolitan area, it's been one of probably the least affected in the country. Fortunately, I don't know anyone who has had COVID in the area, and I don't know anyone who knows anyone who's had it. So we've been pretty fortunate from that standpoint. Homeschooling's been going great. I have two boys, they're 12 and 10, and they're old enough that they can do it on their own. We don't have to be teaching them. My wife works, she's a pharmacist, so she's an essential worker, so she goes out every day and works at the pharmacy, and I usually kind of come here in my office, probably work from the home office in the morning, and spend a lot of time working on outdoor deck there in the backyard in the afternoon usually. So can't complain on a personal level. We've been pretty fortunate.
Thanks, Julien. John?
Yeah, hey everyone. Hope everyone's doing well and this finds you healthy and safe and doing your best you can during the quarantine. But yeah, like everyone else, quarantined here or self-isolated, however you want to term it, in Arizona with my wife and my daughter, who's just under 2 years old. She's still too young to really comprehend everything going on and understand it. But so for her, quarantine's a fun time. We just redid our backyard pool and everything, so she's enjoying it back there. And yeah, I guess always looking for the silver lining in things, getting some good family time, but a difficult time for everyone. Our organization's no different, trying to work through everything and make sure that we can come back bigger and better than ever. So on a personal level, it's same struggles as everybody else, but try to take the best out of everything. And for the most part, things are pretty good here in Arizona. The government's done a pretty good job of controlling the spread, and people are being very compliant, which is great. So that's about it for me.
Thanks, Sean. Kyle?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, John. We're just here in Toronto. We've been essentially in our home since March 12th when the season went on pause and the world really changed. It's just myself and my wife and our young son. He's 2.5 years old, and it's been a great time to be at home with them, especially at his stage and where he's at. He's really developing his personality and his passion for different things, and he loves hockey. So we talk about hockey and play hockey most of the day. And when I have to come up in the office and do work, my wife will sub in and play with him. So it's been a lot of fun that way. And fortunate, I think, even though the situation at large is not a great one worldwide and certainly medically, it's the silver lining has been the amount of time we've had to be able to spend at home with my young guy and as a family. So it's I think we'll look back and feel fortunate about that element of it as we get through the rest of it on a worldwide level.
Thanks, Kyle. Billy, I think you probably have the most crowded house, right?
Yeah, it's pretty crowded. I've been asked to move out a number of times, but I'm holding my ground. We're here in Minneapolis. It's kind of funny, Kara and I were empty nesters for quite a while, and now we've got all four of our kids. Kayla's 22, Grace is 21, Liam's 19 soon, and Lexi's 17. So they're all back in the house. Kayla came back from Europe a couple weeks ago. Her school year over there was cut short. But again, hey, look, we're all looking at the silver lining. We're healthy. We're getting to spend, our family's on the move all the time. So we're getting to spend this quality time together. We're doing some fun stuff at night, trying to stay busy and keep it fresh. And the girls have all been really, really nice to my son and I. We're watching all the Star Wars movies from start to finish. I think we watched our 8th one last night. So we're just doing stuff like that and just trying to, like I said, take advantage of this time. And luckily we're all healthy and yeah, that's the most important thing. And we're trying to make the best of it.
Great. Well, it struck me when we invited you guys, just the different routes to the job. So I was thinking of the old Seinfeld scene where George loses his job for one of the many times and he's, what are you going to do now? Well, I like sports. I'd like to be a general manager of a sports team. And then Jerry says, well, they usually give that to the ex-ball players. But in this case, only one of the 4 played in the NHL. So, yeah, the roots are really interesting to me. So let's go in the opposite direction. So, Billy, I've known you since you were 18, and I don't know when you ever thought you would be a general manager, if it was even on your radar when you're a player, but think about how it prepared you for that.
Well, yeah, I think it prepared me because I had a lot of my own experiences on the business side, like when I was a player, because, well, I guess I was a little stubborn and I had a couple contract holdouts and I really had to learn kind of the ins and outs of the business and what my rights were and this and that. And then I really got heavily involved in the Players Association when we had the strike in 92 and then the lockout in 94, 95. And then the complete lost season. So I really got an inside look at the business, and it really fascinated me. And to be involved in the meetings with like the ownership and the GMs and sit across from the table, that just the business side, like really, like I said, fascinated me. And then, kind of getting later in my career, I had to start thinking about what I was going to do. And I knew I wanted to stay in the game. And I guess there's 2 ways I could have gone. And one is into coaching and one was into management. And when I stopped playing and started doing player development, the management side was much more appealing to me. And, it's been great. And I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process of getting the job and working my way up to it and learning kind of all the ins and outs, because when you're a player, you have no idea the amount of work that goes into putting the whole season together and getting the team ready and just putting on a game. You're just so worried about yourself and your game in, game out performances that you don't have time to worry about anything else. So, but I'm real happy that I decided this path.
John, you were a promising junior player, and I guess a back injury kind of changed your trajectory, and wow, did it change in a hurry. I mean, starting companies before you go to college, making me question what I've done with my life. But tell me how that all adds up to being a GM at 26.
Yeah. Well, first off, I like the Seinfeld tie-in there. That was good. That was really good. But no, I don't know if I was that promising of a junior player to be, at the ilk of some of these guys that are now GMs. But yeah, I think it's unique, or it's interesting that Kyle, Julien, myself, we're younger general managers, but even ourselves, different backgrounds and different paths. And again, that's one of the questions I'm sure we all get is just how do you do it, and what's your advice and stuff like that. And it's just a really tough question to answer because everyone's got such a unique path and everyone's an individual, and there's just so many different ways to go about things. But yeah, for myself, starting businesses and doing some consulting, and just really had an opportunity early on to work with some really quality individuals. That the mentorship piece is critical. So I got to rub elbows with a lot of top executives, different sports, and really just use that experience to create some opportunities for myself to get to where I am today. And fortunate and lucky and all those things come together at the right time for an opportunity like that. But But yeah, I think it's always interesting to talk about and reflect. But at the same time, it's a difficult thing to do, and it's great to be a part of the GM fraternity where it's a good group of guys, and right now as a society we're working through a lot of things, and as general managers we're all working through things as well with our organizations to make sure the league's coming out of this again in the best place possible. So it's been an interesting path to say the least.
Yep. And Julian, I think you're kind of a link between John and Kyle in that you were kind of on the outskirts of the business representing teams and arbitration cases as a lawyer, and then got into the whole general manager climb, the minor leagues up to the majors. So tell me about that, how it all comes together to help you do your job now.
Well, it wasn't planned, and it was very serendipitous. Never really crossed my mind. I did play hockey growing up a little bit, just like anyone in Canada pretty much does. But baseball was really my passion. Baseball was kind of my main sport, the sport I practiced and was consumed by as a young fella. Not very good at that either, so I ended up going to law school. And I was lucky in the fact that at that time, people with non-traditional hockey backgrounds that were being hired in hockey management were lawyers. I remember when I was hired, about half the NHL teams had a lawyer in hockey ops. That meant that there were still half of hockey op departments in the league where there wasn't a lawyer yet. Today, most of the new hires in hockey operations that are not former players or coaches are mostly analytically based, math grads, computer programming, economics. But 20 to 25 years ago, it was lawyers. And so I just got lucky. I was hired at a law firm, and I didn't even know that they wanted to do sports law. And when I was hired there at Heenan Blakey, they had some senior partners that wanted to start a sports law department, and they were looking for someone who was bilingual and who knew about sports and could help them as a junior associate. And that's how I got my start. My plan was to be a tax lawyer. So I'm very far from that today.
Wow. You on the other side of Billy's ARB cases?
No, actually, I didn't work any of Billy's. No.
One ARB case.
So, Kyle, I think when you're in that Toronto media cauldron, it's I think people think you're younger than you are. I think people, it's interesting. You made a steady climb up through, junior hockey, AHL, up to where you are. And what'd you learn at every level, and how does it kind of inform what you do now?
I think, John, I've gotten extremely lucky at all of those different stops. So when I was leaving to go away to university, I had been working for the Sioux Greyhounds in my hometown for a number of years before, I think 6 seasons before I was leaving to go to university, and a number of coaches and GMs that had been there, Craig Hartsburg, who's with Columbus now, and Dave Torrey with LA, they'd always given me lots of opportunity. And it's the smallest budget team, or close to the smallest budget team in the league. So if you're willing to do work, they'll give you a lot to do. And they were more than willing to teach me things and allow me to learn from them. And when I was leaving to go away to university, our area scout in the area where I was going to school at Brock University quit. And they asked me if I wanted to do the job. And so that's how I got into the actual scouting side of it. And then the role, they continued to give me more on the player development side the entire time I was at university. And then I went into the agent business for 5 years. And Julien and I had a great negotiation at one point. We were both 2006 or 2007 that we reminisce about every now and then. And I really didn't like the agent side at all. And just as I was getting ready to move out of it, the job of general manager in Sault Ste. Marie had come open. And that was always my dream growing up, was to, if I could become the GM of the Sioux Greyhounds. That was what I dreamed about as a young person once I couldn't play anymore. And that was really what I aspired to become. And it just worked out, so I was so fortunate. The board believed in me, and the former general manager, Dave Torrey, was a strong proponent and helped me get ready for the interview and the process. And so that was, I was really, really lucky there. And then I was really lucky to have a great staff and great owners in the Sioux who helped push me to to Toronto in 2014, and Shanny, and he showed a lot of faith and giving me a chance and opportunity. And Dave Nonis was great with me, and Lou was great with me. And without all of those fortunate bounces and that mentorship along the way, it doesn't really work, I don't think. And I'm really fortunate in that things sort of happened rapidly, and I had great mentorship and great fortune. I really don't think it's anything more than that, or anything that I did or anything other than that. And that's how I chalk it up, is thankfulness to those people along the way, and fortunate that things opened up at seemingly perfect times.
Well, I wasn't going to get to Lou, but you brought him up, and you and Billy have the Lou connection. So let's get into some of these connections. Look, legendary. I've known him for 35 years. There are very few people in hockey who make an impression on you like Lou Lamoriello. What did you learn from Lou Lamoriello? Go ahead, Billy. You go first.
A lot.
2 minutes.
A lot. But, I will say this. I learned like so many things from Lou and from Jacques Lemaire, because they're like a team, those two. But when you played for the Devils and you were playing for Lou, you learn how important the team aspect is, how important the discipline is, and how important the sacrifice is, and that no one person, no one player is bigger than the team. And he just holds true to that even today. He's never wavered from that. And I've taken a lot of things that I learned from him over the years, even in my personal situations, like when I had my contract holdout with him. He drew a line in the sand, and he knew what I was worth. And you know what? He was going to put the ball in my court, and I was going to he made his decision, and that was it. And when I was ready to play, I took the deal, and that was it, because he was the boss. And the other thing about Lou is he's incredibly loyal. And I know, hey, look, if I got in a jam anytime, anywhere, and if I had one dime to make my phone call or get me out of trouble or help me out in a certain way, and I called Lou, he'd help me. I know that for a fact.
Kyle, how about you?
I think especially in the last season, John, the amount that I learned from Lou was incredible. Just in not even just how to operate the team and how to run a sports franchise, but how to treat people, the importance of your family along the way, the importance that he put on me to make sure that I was taking care of that aspect of my life, and pushing me to always make sure that our people are always doing the same thing. And even though that may not be his reputation to the general public, it was one of the things that I really learned from him. And Billy said it at the very end. He's the type of person that no matter what you're going through and what you have on the go, or whatever kind of jam you're in, he's going to be more upset if you don't call him and ask for his help than if you do and you've done something to screw up. And, that was among the many, many things that I learned from him. And we still talk all the time. And it's sometimes about hockey, but mostly about life and what's happening. And I know the age gap between us is immense, but for me, it's become a great mentor and a great friendship. And I know my whole family feels the same about Lou as well.
Yeah, he's one of the great people. Let's get to a little more fun connection here, a little lighter. So I'm gonna have to read this because it's kind of complicated. 2005 OHL priority selection draft. Kyle, you're scouting for the Sioux.
Mm-hmm.
Like Drew Doughty, 5th overall, makes perfect sense. John Tavares goes 1st overall. No argument so far. How did you let a forward from St. Catharines, John Chayka, go to Plymouth in the 15th round?
No.
Well, John,
you were the area scout too.
I was, yeah. You weren't high on my list, John. Unfortunately, it's just the way it went. He was very tall, and he had a very distinct skating style. And I knew I had a guy that the former director of OHL Central Scouting, Bill Needham. He was a big. He had a relationship with John's father and John, and he would always push John onto me, and just the way I am can be a little bit stubborn. The more that someone pushes something onto me and I don't agree with it, I tend to become a little bit more charged. So John's advocates heard him more in the books of the Sioux Greyhounds than anything. But it's the one that got away. But he did all right for himself, so it's all good.
But John, as those names are ticking off, John Tavares, Drew Doughty, I think they also took Jake Muzzin in the 11th.
Yeah.
Like, come on, I'm better than that guy.
It's a good draft. No wonder I fell down. No, it's a good year. Yeah. I know Muzz a little bit too. That was a good pick. He started off, he's high pick, had some injuries, got drafted late, and then they didn't even sign him, I believe, right, Kyle? And then
we got killed. The Sioux is quite an interesting market, so it's there's a lot of pressure there, and the media are very negative. It's the only show in town, so we let that was the year that Logan Couture was supposed to go first, and then they let John Tavares in as an exempt player, and so Couture was supposed to go to Oshawa, and then there was questions about whether he was going to report to the league, and we were picking 11th. And, on draft day, it was the second draft that I was in the draft room for, like, as a scout. And he starts falling down the list. And it was, his agent was Joe Thornton's brother, John, and Joe Resnick in their firm. And our GM, Dave Torrey's frantically trying to get a hold of them to see if Couture would come to the Sioux. And we had Muzzin at the top of our list, thinking that was going to be our top guy there anyway. And so Dave had to make one of those decisions right in the moment. Do we stick with our list or do we take our chance on Couture? And we stuck with Muzzin. And then in his first summer, he didn't play the entire first season because he had to have back surgery and didn't even return until partway through his 17-year-old year. So we took some heat in the Sioux for that pick at the time, but it ended up working out really well.
You ended up with my two line mates, Josh Mose in the second round, and then Jordan. And Jordan was my line mate. And he ended up in the Sioux. I think he went to Erie at first, but
right.
A lot of names.
Billy, you and I are like listening to this conversation. We don't even know what they're talking about.
I was still playing in those days, so I was just worried about. I didn't even know they still had a draft.
So now, Julian, you and Kyle had some GM battles in the AHL. You'd won your 2 Calder Cups when he came in with the Marlies and beat you guys in the 18 playoffs on their way to winning the Calder Cup there. What was it like going against him in the AHL?
I always had a lot of respect for Kyle. He was really prepared. And our teams, because they were in the same division, we would meet each other a lot, including often in preseason. So a lot of interaction with Cal from the time we were both GMs of our respective AHL franchises. And that's kind of where the relationship really started. We did have a contract negotiation when Kyle was an agent for a minor league player. But until he brought it up to me at the last GM meeting, I had completely forgotten about it, to be honest. But his time in Toronto, we did interact a lot when he was running the Marlies and I was running the Crunch. And in 2017, we were fortunate enough to have the upper hand. And his team in Toronto was a little bit younger than ours. We ended up beating them in the playoffs, and then we went to the Calder Cup finals. And the following year, he essentially brought his same team back, but a year more experienced, and they reciprocated and they beat us in the playoffs on their way to their cup. So a couple good battles there.
All right. Let's get into some things that I think are just misconceptions about the job, but maybe they're not. So I think people think you guys sit around all day dreaming up trades and talking to other GMs about trades when it's probably, 1/100th of your job. So Julian, tell me, what is the
days that we can do that are called good days. That means there are no fires to put out. We actually have time to look at, okay, how can we move our team forward instead of just taking care of what needs to be taken care of on a day-to-day basis. But sorry, I interrupted your question there.
Yeah. So what really takes up the time?
Well, it's the title is general manager, right? So that's what we're doing. We're mostly working with people. We're managing people. First and foremost, probably our NHL coaches, and then whoever runs our pro scouting, whoever runs our amateur scouting, our analytics people, our operations people, whoever is looking after player development in our minor league team. So those are the people you end up interacting with the most. and obviously the NHL team, the actual players and the staff on that team. So most of the time you're reaching out to all these people to see how they're doing, if they need anything, what are they working on, just giving them support and a little bit of guidance. That's most of the job on a day-to-day basis. And then depending on from one day to the next, you never know what you're going to be working on. But I can, in normal circumstances, I can usually tell you, well, I know what I'll be working on in June. I know what I'll be working on in July. I know what I'll be working on in August. Like from year to year, there's a cycle. You're usually working on similar things at similar times over the course of a calendar year.
Yeah. So John, best and worst parts of the job. You've been through like maybe 4 trade deadlines now, and I never enjoyed it as a reporter, and I can't imagine it's a fun day for a general manager.
Yeah, those are the fun days. Yeah, yeah. You know, in some ways, maybe less so. But sorry, I think I lost you. No, I think it's tough to categorize best and worst parts. I think, you know, for us in Arizona, we've been slightly different than some of these other guys in the call, and probably slightly different than most organizations in the sense of my third majority owner in 4 years here. And, you know, we're looking to build a new rink and do some different things. So it's almost been like, you know, starting up a business in a lot of ways in terms of, you know, we had a skeleton crew of you know, scouting staff, development staff. So building up those, you know, staffs and the infrastructure around it. We bought our American League team in Tucson, which has been a huge addition and windfall for organization. But again, you know, you have to start up that entire organization, you know, the facilities, the people, hiring a staff, hiring coaches, you know, first time training camp, selling tickets, all that kind of stuff. So doing a lot of legwork on that side of things. So I'd say within some of those tasks, there's a lot of good days and bad days and you know, some fun work. And at the end of the day, sometimes the hardest days kind of lead, or the biggest challenges leads to the most rewarding part of the job. So, you know, it's a difficult job. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, you're right. The idea that it's, you know, we're just on the phone all day calling each other nonstop, trying to make trades. I mean, maybe some guys do that. I certainly, you know, it's a portion of the job. It's an important part of the job, but doesn't take up the bulk of my time by any stretch.
Kyle and Billy, I would imagine the hardest thing about your job so far was having to make a coaching change, and people you respect and you like. That has to be just excruciating. It's excruciating for the other guy. I understand that, but I mean, for you to have to do it, it must be just so tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a fun part of the job, but you know, it's just something that you sign up for. You have to do it, and if you feel it's the right thing and you've gone through all the right steps to make sure it's the right thing, then you know, then you got to carry out the duty of it. And you know, for me, it you know, it was a process. You know, you just don't wake up one morning and say, you know, oh, I'm going to let this guy go. It's a series of events that go on, and you have to replay them and talk about them and go over it with your team and make sure that you're doing the right thing, because, you know, this is somebody's livelihood as well. And it was a big decision, but in the end, you have to stand by it and be confident that you're doing the right thing for your team.
Kyle, I imagine it's something you have to do face to face, right? You can't, you know, or at least on the phone.
Yeah, I would say it has to be done face to face would be the absolute way to do it. We had made a change in the Sioux during my second season, and a few changes during the first year here. But so this year was the first time in a long time that I actually gone through it with somebody that you work so close with day to day, and that you just feel you have to make the change with. So like Billy said, it's certainly not something that is done haphazardly where you wake up one day and say, you know, today's the day. It's usually an accumulation of a lot of things. And it's one of the more, I think, you know, you asked about the worst parts of the job. I don't know that there are many bad parts of the job, but I think certainly when you let people go, knowing the impact it has on them, some obviously worse than others, depending on your relationship that you have with them, but it's difficult, and a lot of time goes into it. A lot of discussions with the people above you go into it, and they're certainly not easy, but you have to do what you think is best for the future of your program. And sometimes that's some very difficult conversations with people that you've worked with a long time.
Here's one. So as a former reporter, one of my favorite things in the transition has been going to GM's meetings. It's fascinating to me to watch it. And there's a dynamic in that room that is not unlike a locker room, right? You have captains and veterans, and then you have younger guys who walk in. And we know what a hockey locker room is like. Younger guys don't usually talk at the beginning. And I'm just wondering what it was like. And I'll try to go in chronological order. I think, John, you probably were the first one to join this august group. When you walk into your first general manager's meeting and you look around, is it intimidating? Do you think, you know what, I just shouldn't say anything for 2 meetings? Or how'd you deal with it?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, obviously it's, like you said, they're interesting meetings because when you're in them, you're not necessarily thinking this way, but when you kind of reflect, I mean, obviously you're setting kind of the standard and you're making decisions that not only impact the NHL, but, hockey in general, and a lot of the leagues follow suit. And so a lot of these decisions and discussions, we always talk about the unintended consequences and things of that nature. There's always a fallout and a lot of implications for any decision we make. So I mean, part of the, hesitation to be too active is, you really have to think through these things deeply and have a, very robust conversation, make sure you're making the right decision, looking at it from all different perspectives. And I think that's the one thing that, we can certainly provide is the potential for a different perspective, having some different backgrounds and stuff like that. So yeah, there's an opportunity to chime in and provide perspective and help the group in terms of those bigger decisions. Yeah, absolutely. We'll have our say, but I think it's a great analogy, and it's true. There's guys that just, the Doug Wilsons, the Doug Armstrongs, the Kenny Hollands, the David Poyle. He's always got the agenda rolling pretty good. So, you defer to those guys to some degree, and but at the same time you can add value. Yeah, you should definitely try to. So that's how I approach it.
And our league moves, and it's a good thing. We have tradition, and we don't like to just rip up our game every 3 years and change it. So we like to move incrementally. And so, Kyle, you walk into your first GM's meeting, are you like coming in full of ideas, or you're like, I'm just going to listen?
I had to do John, I had to do the meeting in 2015 between Dave Nonis being let go and Lou coming in. I was scared shitless when I walked into the room in Vegas. So I was one of the most nervous times I've ever had in my life. And Shanny told me before I went, just don't say anything to anybody. So I went in there, and I've known Ronnie Francis my whole life. So he was like the only person I felt I could talk to. And then I just went and sat in my chair and took notes in the meeting and got up and left. But I was, I was nervous as anything, and I really didn't feel like I belonged in there. I'd only been in the league for 1 year, and, we were still a month away from having Lou hired. So I just went in there and took my notes and got on the plane. And I think the draft was in Florida. Got on the plane with some of the other guys and got on the way to Florida. But certainly it was very intimidating at that time.
Julien, same for you?
I wasn't saying a word. I knew my first couple of meetings, nothing at all.
We're still waiting on your first word.
And nobody has ever said that about me. I've always got a lot to say. I'm always talking. I'm always throwing jabs. And there are some times where like a guy I sit next to Mark Bergevin, who's one of the funniest people you could ever meet, and he's always cracking jokes or throwing a jab at somebody, and it's in my head, but I'm doing a pretty good job of not letting it out of my mouth. I'm controlling that part, but no, you're gonna listen. You're gonna learn more with your ears, not your mouth. And like John said, some of the guys that have been around a long time, they really, they obviously they know what they're doing, and they're kind of control the agenda a little bit. But it's good for me to sit there and listen and learn. And I guess the one thing that I've really noticed is I think before you get a GM job and you're reading about certain things like little rule changes here and there. Yeah, just change the rule. No big deal. Whatever. No, it is a big deal. And the smallest little rule change can just have a huge impact on the game of hockey, because we're the NHL. We're the best league in the world. And if we make a rule change, it's going to impact every league below us. And to me, that was a real eye opener. And so, the smallest little things mean a lot. And it's good to have the veteran guys around to talk to after and have a beer with. And, and the good thing is somebody said it's like a fraternity. And when you go out and you have dinner with a small group and you're listening to all the stories from the past and stuff like that, it's a lot of fun. It's a great group to be involved with.
Yeah. And Julian, the thing that I found reassuring was that most guys, not everybody, let's not fool anybody, but most guys walk into that room, they take off their team hat and they put on their league hat, and they actually do think in terms of the 31 teams, because we all know each team has a very different reality. I mean, even going into this playoffs when we resume, if you're out right now, you want everybody in the playoffs. If you're in first place like you are, let's start the playoffs tomorrow. So you can't think that way at a GM's meeting.
No, for sure. You're wearing two hats. If we're being completely candid, you always have your GM of, in my case, Tampa Bay Lightning hat on, but you also have your hat of, we're one of the caretakers of the league and of the game. And obviously that's a very important responsibility for us. And I felt the same way when I would go to American Hockey League Board of Governors or GM meetings there. We do have a responsibility to the greater good. And I think some of the general managers that have more experience than certainly I do, that have been around for a while, they kind of lead the way, and they show us how it should be done. And my first thought going to the first GM meeting as the general manager was just looking around the room and how humbling it was, because I had so much respect for all the other guys that were in that room, and I felt privileged that I was now one of them.
That's one of the best things about our game. There's respect, but I also feel like I've watched it in the time I've been at the league. The younger group has a much larger voice now. And from my personal perspective, we're always trying to get guys to wear mics and do things like this. We need your guys. We need the voices of the younger guys to come to the room.
The league, the one thing that the league does very well to make sure that everyone is heard at the GM meetings is the breakout groups. Mm-hmm. I remember my first March GM meeting, the one that's a little more substantial and goes over a few days. And I think, Cal, it was probably your first as well. We were in the same subgroup, and some of the topics we were mandated with discussing were AHL rules. And because Kyle and I probably had a little closer connection with what was going on in the AHL than some of the other guys in the room, we actually ended up doing most of the talking, because the other guys were asking us what we think. What was your experience like with this rule, or with how players have reacted to these types of situations? So the league does a good job to make sure that we're heard when it's all said and done as well.
All right, a couple of quick ones. You guys have been generous with your time, and I could do this forever, but I will not impose that upon you. John, when you made your first trade, are you like playing chess? You have your finger on the piece. You're just like, I can't pull the trigger, or were you ready to go?
No, ready to go. I guess. I think it was. I think my first trade. I should remember this more, but I do think it was trading for the rights to Alex Goligoski for like a 5th round pick. Either that, or we traded a prospect who we figured wouldn't sign with us, Latunov, to San Jose for a couple of picks. Either way, they were both kind of lower risk moves. So felt like it wasn't like we were taking on too much. We couldn't really lose the trade. It would just probably be a nothing type of deal at worst. So I think those are what we did, and it wasn't too nerve-wracking. But I mean, you're always every trade is nerve-wracking if we're being honest, but not too bad.
Kyle, was your first one hard?
It was during that same stretch in 2015. It was with Dale Talon, who was the GM of Florida at that time and is again now. And he was great to deal with. I don't think you could ask for somebody more straightforward and blunt about their position on it. And it was kind of refreshing. And he was actually very helpful to me, because he referenced a number of times it was my first trade. And at first I thought it was some type of setup to pull one over, but in getting to know Dale and getting to know him more, he was just trying to be helpful, and it ended up working out for them and for us, and that was in June 2015. So some of them have been much more nerve-wracking, like when you're moving out a lot of assets, like last year the Jake Muzzin deal, and just wondering is this the right thing, and you get caught up in what you're giving up versus what you're returning back, and so on and so forth. So no, it's it's always nerve-wracking, I think, but you try to just educate, and you're largely dealing with a great group of people, so it's all pretty good.
Julian, given where you've been in the standings, is people are always asking for your first round pick? Is that the way the conversation always starts?
No, of late I've heard, well, your first round pick's kind of like a second. So,
Oh, God.
Hey, it is. Bill, you're one of the guys saying that.
Huh?
You're one of the guys who said that to me.
Yeah.
No,
it's like a second.
we've been
All right,
fortunate. We've been in a position in our standings where we've been looking to add at the deadline the last 2 years, and this year we felt very fortunate we had opportunities to do that, and now we really look forward to when we get the opportunity to see what the team that we now have and what the makeup of that team is and what the potential of that team is, and hoping to have the opportunity to realize that potential in the coming weeks.
Billy, if I'm not mistaken, you came out of the blocks with a pretty big one, right? Trading a hometown boy, Pittsburgh.
Yeah. It, obviously, I was on the other side of that deal, a couple months before that. So, the summer before, we were trying to trade for Jason Zucker in Pittsburgh, and it fell through. So, Jim and I had talked right off the start, about the possibilities of that. But I wanted to wait because I wanted to see kind of how everything was going in Minnesota. And then in the end, it seemed like a good move to make where we could get a little bit younger, get a first round pick, get a prospect. I've actually been I've traded for Alex Galchenyuk twice in less than a calendar year, which is pretty funny. But no, you know what? And hey, look, I've been traded plenty of times in my life, and it's always a tough thing on a player. But I also realize that they'll come out okay on the other side. And just, trying to do my homework as best I could, make sure the deal, like Jim always taught me, make a fair deal. Don't ever try to win one. Don't ever try to screw somebody over, because then you won't have a trade partner there for long. So I really felt like Jim and I worked well together and got a fair deal for both sides. So it worked.
All right, one last one for me, and John, I'll save you for last on this one because you know this one. It's such a straw man argument, analytics versus the eye test, because I don't think any GM who's any good is only using one or the other. But Billy, let me start with you. So, to me, I'm a math guy. Analytics kind of just tells you what you should be seeing already, or it gives you another way to look at things. What's your view of the whole debate? And or there have to be places for both, right?
John, you know me, I am not a math guy.
Well,
but no, hey, look, I am I'm in full support of analytics. I really am. I am in full support of it. And I just feel, there's a different way to look at the game. I think if you have a strong scouting staff that knows the game and they're going out and doing their job, and you have a strong analytics staff that looks at the game on a purely numbers, by the numbers, why wouldn't you use both? And why wouldn't you compare the two and see what you get? I think it's extremely important to have a strong analytics department in your team, in your organization. And I think it can only help, but you need both. There's got to be a good balance through your organization, I feel.
Yeah. Kyle, same thing. And as you've climbed the ranks, it's totally changed, I think, in your tenure as a junior NHL NHL GM. Analytics has just been exploded.
Yeah, I think if you go back to 2012-13, it was more of a polarizing topic. And I think now, especially if you can get all sides working together, and I think the key is having everybody know that you're not trying to one up the other side. It's what can both sets of information tell you about every player and every decision that you make, and how can they help one another, and how can they stop one another from going down a negative paths and making bad decisions. I think that's the key, and it's just getting over at first the inherent battle between the subjective scouting data and different things that you're picking up, coaching experience, so on and so forth, and then the objective data from analytics or what have you, and just trying to build it all together so that everyone knows that you're in it together and you're trying to help one another out versus try to show that one element is better than the other.
Yeah. Julien, I won't ask you to get specific or embarrass anybody, but has there ever been a player who you saw numbers on and you said, I don't see that at all, and it totally changed your perspective or maybe reinforced something that you were thinking that nobody else was thinking?
That's what the analytics information gives us. It's a different perspective, and so every now and then, most of the time, it actually confirms what the eye test tells us. But every now and then, it raises a question, and then you can investigate further, and you can have conversations with the people that are providing the eyeball test and the information from scouts, who are people that have a long history with the game, and put things into context a little bit more and get a better understanding of what's going on and of the strengths or potential weaknesses of the player. And that's where it kind of comes together, right? If you're only looking at the information that is curated via the eyeball test, you're going to miss something. And if you only use the information that is generated via numbers and statistics, you're also going to miss something. So that's why the idea is to effectively merge the information from both areas to give us a better understanding and a clearer picture of players, of situation, of plays, of teams.
Yeah. And John, I was saving you for last, not for you to defend anything, but more for you to explain it. But I'd also like to ask you, with player and puck tracking coming in, are there certain things that you have always wanted to know that you think we're now going to know? I mean, I've always wondered, people always say, this guy makes a great first pass. Do we really know that, or we just don't have anything nice to say about that defenseman? So, I'd like to know the completion percentages. I would like to know that.
Yeah. Look, I think these guys, made a lot of great points about this discussion. So, not much to I think, if you're doing things right, and it's probably, there is no debate, there's no one versus the other. I think, I don't really understand the debate, because we don't make any decisions kind of solely based off of numbers. We don't make any decisions solely based off of someone's opinion. We try to look at it from all different ends and use all the information to make all the decisions. And so this player and puck tracking is just, another added tool and something, get a lot more context to some of the information. So for instance, what you just talked about, we might actually, have individuals or ways of tracking, defenseman's first pass, but, there might be some context in terms of, the team or who they're playing against, how that player is, if the speed of the game or the speed of the forecheck or the type of forecheck they're facing. And, there's just a lot of variables, and, sometimes you add those variables and it becomes noisy and you actually end up knowing less. And sometimes there's some things that are really key and really important to understand and add a lot of value to that discussion or to that evaluation. So this player puck tracking is certainly, as we've seen with other leagues, and we know with our own, the next frontier information. And I'm excited. I think it's going to be great for, front offices, but mainly fans and casts and things of that nature. I mean, it's the information age. Everyone's craving information. And, I just think access to this information really helped the game as a whole. And, I'm excited to see what we learn, as much as, we know a lot about the game. There's certain things that seen in other leagues where it educates you and it can change, part of the way the game's being played. And I think you're going to see some of that as well in the NHL. So it'll be fun to get the information and work through it. It'll take some time, of course, for people to really understand what we're dealing with, but it's certainly the next evolution of information.
All right. Well, as I said, I could do this all afternoon, but I won't. So I'll just let's close it by giving each of you a chance to maybe say something to the people who are kind of trying to get through this together in your own market and all around the league. Julien, why don't we start with you?
I'm going to steal it actually from NFL Hall of Famer Derek Brooks, who works for us with the NBC Sports Group. And on a call earlier this morning, he was asked the same question, and his line was, "Stay poised during the noise." And I think it gives us good indication of what we should be doing right now. Like things are hard. Dealing with uncertainty is always challenging, whatever that is. And obviously there's so much uncertainty for everyone right now, not just in our business, but in society. And yes, we're all NHL general managers, but we also all have families and we have loved ones that we care for. And there's a lot of uncertainty in their lives as well right now. So we need to stay poised and remember that we're going to get through this. We're all going to get through this together. We should all stick together. It's been incredible to see how communities have come together, how our players throughout the league have volunteered to help out people within all our communities. We are people in our business, really some of the most fortunate people in society. And we just need to remember that and to continue to give back and help out. And if we do that, we're going to get through on the other side, and we're going to get back on the ice eventually and get our fans back in the building and have a lot of things to cheer for. And those days are coming. We just have to keep believing.
Thanks, Julien. John?
Yeah, just echoing a lot of what Julien said there. I think, you know, here in Arizona, we've got a new owner, Alex Morello, and our CEO, Aaron Cohen. We always talk about, you know, we have two main goals. 1A is, you know, win a lot of hockey games, and 1B is make a positive impact in our community. And, you know, obviously we can't take care of 1A right now. Hopefully in the near future we can get back to doing that. But, you know, impacting our community in a positive way is a big part of what we're trying to accomplish and do here. And you know, it's the best part about sports, I think, is that community aspect and people coming together and socializing. And we're social beings. So this is, you know, being isolated is difficult on everyone. It's difficult on players, coaches, and people in the greater society. And so I think we've got to rely on each other now more than ever and come together as, you know, as managers, as coaches, as players, as a community, as a league. And I do believe that if we do that, and I believe we can, then we will come out of this, you know, bigger, better, stronger than ever. And, you know, it's through a lot of these times, if you look back through history, that society has come out in a better way. And as much as that's difficult to look at now, you know, I think like Julien said, stay poised, you know, day by day, keep working through things here, and we'll come out in a good place. So again, I hope everyone's healthy and safe, and this was fun.
Thanks, John. Kyle?
Yeah, I think I feel personally, and I think everyone else on the call feels pretty fortunate. We're able to spend a lot of the time and listening to everyone at the beginning of the call with people who we love and enjoy being around every day. And this, the silver lining of this is it's allowed us to strengthen those bonds that we otherwise wouldn't normally have a chance to do because of our schedules and our routines take us away from those people daily and sometimes for weeks at a time during different events. And so I think take advantage of that, but also just look out for other people who you know that are on their own. And it's I don't know what it would be like to go through this if I was just here in the house on my own for 6 weeks or in a condo on my own for 6 weeks. So if there are people that you know that are on their own and you don't know how they're dealing with it, just check in on them and show care and love for them, and do your part to stay inside and protect the people on the front lines that are doing such a great job to slow and stop this pandemic.
And Billy, I know you have a lot of friends and even relatives in New Jersey and Long Island, and I'm sure you're thinking of them as well as everybody else around the country.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you know, these guys have all said some great things that I agree with. And right now there's bigger things to deal with in hockey. You know what, we all want to get back on the ice. We all want to get back playing games, and we will when it's safe to do so. And we can do that with the safety of our players, our fans, people that work at the buildings, everybody involved. We've got to do it when everybody's going to be 100% safe. These are unusual times, but you know, hey, look, I just feel like it's a time to you know, take advantage of being with your family, of being locked down. That's what we're trying to do here. I mean, I don't have all the answers or anything like that. It's just what I'm trying to do. And, you know, I think if you look at it, there are a lot of other people out there that are hurting. And the more that we can give back, the more that we can support our communities, the better off we're going to be. And we'll come through with flying colors in the end. So, yeah, that's my encouragement, to get out there and support our local communities, because there are definitely people that are hurting out there. So, you know, if you're one of the fortunate ones, it's we're in a lucky spot, but there are a lot of people out there that need to be looked after. So I just wish everybody a lot of health and happiness, and this was a lot of fun.
All right. Well, Julien, John, Kyle, and Billy, thanks so much for taking the time today. This was great. I hope it gave fans a little some hockey to think about at a time like this. And next time we see you, let's hope you're in a press box watching your team play in the playoffs. Thanks again.
Thanks.
John.